It's time, Cougar Nation. Cougar Tracks. The best season analysis with BYU insider Mitch Harper on KSL NewsRadio and on video every day on the YouTube page for KSL Sports.
Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL NewsRadio, your legacy home of the Cougars. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. It's Monday, December 22nd here on the show. A little bit later than usual here on the program because my internet here at my home office completely went out. So Xfinity, get your stuff together. It caused a delay on a newsy day for BYU football, and that's where we start things off here on our top story on Cougar Tracks.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
Wake up the echoes, Cougar Nation. BYU football is going to be hosting the Notre Dame Fighting Irish next season. BYU and Notre Dame both announced that they have agreed to a home-and-home series in 2026 in Provo and then 2027 in South Bend. It brings BYU's 12th opponent to the 2026 schedule because, of course, last week we discussed that BYU and Cal was no longer on the books after Cal decided to cancel that series. Well, BYU clearly upgraded and gets the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. It's a noteworthy scheduling agreement, one because Notre Dame's one of the great brands in college football. It's a mixed bag for BYU fans with Notre Dame because Notre Dame really has left BYU high and dry many times when it comes to scheduling. And most recently, the Pop-Tarts Bowl was reported as an opportunity for Notre Dame and BYU to meet. Notre Dame opts out of the game completely, and they took their ball and went home. And then you can go back to 2022. The last time these two programs met, BYU, remember, was supposed to have a home game. That home game morphed into a Notre Dame home game in Las Vegas, and BYU fans were very limited in their access to tickets as it was a Shamrock Series game for Notre Dame. With all that said, though, it's a massive deal for BYU to get this game because, as we know, BYU the last 2 years has been flirting with the college football playoff, hovering around the bracket, yet they can't seem to get in. And one of the common threads the past couple of years, at least since BYU joined the Big 12 Conference, is that their non-conference scheduling has been really light. So it's been all based their resume on the Big 12. And the Big 12 continues to fight a perception battle, and they have no data points the last 2 years that have bolstered BYU's strength from non-conference play. Now, this will give BYU, if they're good, and if Notre Dame's good, a chance to really bolster the resume and say, you can't deny us now, put us in the playoff. Again, assuming BYU is in that conversation. And I think BYU has the potential to do that with if they can retain the players from this year's team that still have eligibility and get LJ Martin to come back, get guys like Keanu Tanavasa to run it back, things like that. BYU could be an outstanding football team next season. I think Notre Dame is built to have a lot of success. I'm very curious to see what Marcus Freeman does. Does he go to the NFL and maybe pursue that New York Giants job potentially? So a lot of moving pieces, but BYU needed a game. They got notified by Cal a couple months ago that this game with Cal was going to go off the books. So even though it was in October when that officially got canceled, that's kind of scrambling time in college football scheduling terms. So to get Notre Dame and to get them in Provo, massive deal. So that means BYU has 7 home games in 2026 still, and then they have 6 in 2027, and then they've got a marquee road game in the non-conference going to South Bend. The positives to that is that, again, huge opportunity between BYU and Notre Dame and a real resume-boosting opportunity for BYU. I think the downside, though, is giving Notre Dame a quality opponent. And it was noteworthy that Notre Dame football, their social media accounts said, when they announced this scheduling series, another marquee opponent. Respect to BYU, great. But I think there's this feeling that with this new college football playoff contract being formed, and we still don't officially know what the new format is going to be, it seems like it's probably going to be a 12-team format. Notre Dame, starting next year, if they're ranked in the top 12, they get an automatic bid to the college football playoff. An automatic bid. Don't have to play in a conference. If they're in the top 12, they are in. Even if they're 9-3, they would be into the playoff. So there's this thought that why not box them out, completely not schedule them, and force their hand to join a conference like everyone else. Be part of the SEC, be part of the Big Ten, whatever you want to be part of, ACC, Big 12, go join a league. But understand that BYU needed a game. They needed a 12th game, and to make it Notre Dame, huge opportunity for BYU, and you can't turn that down. And from a revenue perspective, BYU is going to make a lot of money, probably on their season tickets now, because solely of this game. I think even if Notre Dame wasn't on the schedule and it was Cal or someone else, BYU would have had tremendous interest in their season tickets. Now, with Notre Dame, you kick it into overdrive, and in an era of revenues mattering so much in college athletics, this is a big deal, and when you have this opportunity, you can't turn it down. And I think people got to give a lot of credit to Brian Santiago, BYU's athletic department, their administration, for bringing this game together. And it's really the biggest football series announcement in the Brian Santiago tenure. You know, he told me at Big 12 Media Day that when it came to football scheduling, because that was to me something that kind of gets overlooked since joining the Big 12, is what's going to be the strategy with football scheduling. Tom Holmoe kind of built it out to be kind of light in non-conference scheduling in the early years of the Big 12. Santiago really hasn't had to go out and get a game until now with this. But Santiago told me when opportunities would pose itself, he's going to go get someone big. And he did that. And again, I think people kind of knock Santiago for whatever reason. I don't know what those are. But the guy wants to win at a high level, and he wants to do things in a big way. And look, it takes an entire athletic department to get these sort of games, and the relationships that BYU has built with individuals like Dave Brown from Gridiron and things like that help the cause to get these sort of games. But ultimately, Brian Santiago getting a series like this together, that's big time. And think about this too, BYU and Notre Dame going home and home. Even in the years with Lavelle Edwards, when BYU was getting the Irish and Glenn Tuckett lined up those scheduling agreements with Notre Dame, those were 2-for-1s, not solely home and home. Maybe more of a reflection that Notre Dame is a little bit more boxed out with some of their opponents. Like USC, that series is gone now. The earliest that could be scheduled is 2030, which honestly is a shame. USC and Notre Dame should be playing annually. That's just a great college football iconic series. And to think that they're not playing, it's just bizarre. It's crazy. I don't quite understand that, to be honest, why Lincoln Riley would want to potentially duck that series. Now, Notre Dame was saying, hey, any place, anytime, anywhere against USC, we just want the game. But at the same time, BYU understands this with independence, where you can't get games in September that you've already got predetermined for years. I mean, Notre Dame's got Alabama, they got Texas, they got a bunch of SEC programs in the month of September. You're not going to cancel that. For USC, who's not going to be flexible, so they couldn't come to an agreement. BYU knew that all too well with many programs. I mean, I always thought it was confusing how BYU as an independent would give in to Utah when Utah was saying we're only going to play in September. It's like you could get anyone when you were an independent like BYU, you could get anyone in September. That's the same way with Notre Dame. You can get anyone in September. And so that Notre Dame series in USC is gone, which is a shame because, again, it's one of the iconic rivalries in college football. And the earliest that will come back is 2030, but it opened the door for BYU, and it's a great series. I think it's going to be a great TV matchup, and it's going to be two good football teams squaring off for a chance, hopefully, to have some high stakes. It was reported by Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports that the game would be in October. I look at the October 10th, October 17th dates to be some possible targets there for this. And, but you got to be flexible. I think, whatever it needs to be, I think that the Big 12 needs to be strategic with how they build out BYU's schedule when it comes to this Notre Dame game. And that's my next talking point here on the program is when you look at BYU's 2026 schedule, the Big 12 has to make sure to have BYU in a position for that Notre Dame game, which should be a massive opportunity. Notre Dame is a team last year that was in the national championship game. This year, they were the first team out of the college football playoff. BYU was the second team outside of the college football playoff. Put BYU in a position to get a win in that game at home. And what I mean by that is finding a way, depending on where that game lands in the month of October, get a bye week before that Notre Dame game. Let's say, hypothetically, BYU and Notre Dame play October 17th. Again, Notre Dame said that the date hasn't been officially finalized. It'll be announced at a later date, that date for the BYU Notre Dame game in Provo in 2026. But hypothetically, in this scenario, let's say October 17th, which would be about midway in the season, halfway point. Keep in mind, next year in college football, there's only one bye week. One. There's no longer the 2 bye weeks next week because the season starts in September. Week 1 will be September 5th. In the years where week 1 is in August, that's when you get 2 bye weeks. That's been the past 2 seasons. Next year, it's only 1 bye week. So that bye week, where it gets placed, is critical. And I think with this Notre Dame BYU game, if you're the Big 12, and this is a massive marquee opportunity for not only BYU, but your league as a whole, you've got to protect BYU and make sure they're in a place where health-wise they're at their best version of themselves, and you got to get a bye. So here's how I would build it out in a scenario where, say, BYU and Notre Dame is playing October 17th. You open the season September 5th, Utah Tech. We know that. That's week 1. Week 2, which was originally going to be Cal on September 12th, that no longer has a date. I would go BYU versus Arizona. Arizona does not have a September 12th non-conference game in their schedules right now. I would go with the Cougs and the Wildcats on September 12th. And here's why. 2 teams that finished in the college football playoff top 25 final rankings. If there's going to be a chance to market a potential marquee BYU Arizona matchup, it's going to be in the first couple weeks of the season. Week 2, you can maybe put that as a weeknight, Friday night Fox college football game because Fox has showed a tendency to put Big 12 matchups in week 2 or week 3 on a Friday night on Network Fox. That could be an early season TV selection game that's pretty marketable, got some storylines. Noah Fafita goes into his senior year, Bear Bachmeier, enough said right there, and those 2 teams played a double overtime game. I would have that be the week 2 game and kick off Big 12 play with 2 teams that were really good in 2025. September 19th, BYU goes on the road at Colorado State. And what I like about that game is it's short travel. I would expect a lot of Cougar fans could be there. We saw what Folsom Field looked like. BYU had a ton of fans at that game at Colorado. I would expect more of the same, maybe even a greater presence at Colorado State, especially, too, with it being the first road game of the season. Then after Colorado State, a road game, I think if you're the Big 12, bring BYU back home and play Baylor. September 26th, that's been a spot where 2 years ago they played Baylor kind of in that territory, late September. And also my thought, too, is Baylor has back-to-back home games in the non-conference, so they might be ready to go out on the road. I think that would be a good spot for BYU and Baylor. And again, in this exercise, if we're assuming BYU maybe plays October 17th, again, there's a lot of weeks in October. It could be a spot, but for this exercise, we're going to say October 17th. This is where the nuance comes into play. October 3rd, which would be General Conference weekend, I would put BYU at UCF. And I would make that game if you can, with the TV networks, because BYU and UCF, that's not a sexy matchup, but what it could be sexy on is a weeknight. Make that a Friday night game, October 2nd. It's a 2-time zone game. The following week, when BYU has that long travel back home, make the following week, October 10th, a bye. And then October 17th, in this exercise, if it becomes that date, we'll see what BYU Notre Dame becomes. I'd put BYU versus Notre Dame. So then if you're the Big 12, you're giving BYU 15 days to prep for the Irish. You play October 2nd against UCF on the road on Friday night, and then they get home, BYU, after the long travel for General Conference weekend. Then you have a bye week, and then Notre Dame. I bring all this up because I think this sort of thing matters, because this series between BYU and Notre Dame could be a real storyline narrative game for the conference. You want to dispel this narrative that, hey, the Big 12 is inferior, they don't play a good brand of football, go beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame, say what you will about them, and that should they join the conference, are they playing weak schedules, whatever you want to say about them, they get respect. They do. The only reason why they got left out this year was because they had a loss head-to-head to Miami, and they got paired up side by side with each other, and ultimately head-to-head won out, which it should. That's how this sport should be operating. But I think that's something, to me, the nuance of how the Big 12 is building out its schedule with this game expected to be in October. You got to be thoughtful of that and give BYU the necessary time to get healthy and be right for this game. Because even though it's not a conference game, BYU and Notre Dame might be as big as any game on next year's schedule from the narrative, from all of that. And you hope that these two teams are living up to the high expectations that they've produced the last 2 years. Because BYU, they've won 22 games the past 2 seasons. And with so much expected to return, and a lot of it hinges, I think, on LJ Martin, what he decides, this could be a big year for BYU football next season. So that is a massive game. And so I think some of that nuance is how I would structure BYU's schedule. If I was Scott Draper, if I was the Big 12 offices putting this together, knowing now that BYU and Notre Dame is in the mix, I'd be very strategic with where I put BYU's bye week. If I was building out the rest of the schedule after Notre Dame for BYU in 2026, I'd go October 17th, Notre Dame, October 24th, I'd go at TCU, so send BYU on the road. Tricky spot. October 31st, Arizona State, BYU, Halloween night, late night, 8:30 p.m., trick-or-treating. That just screams Halloween night to me. I don't know why. But BYU, ASU, sign me up. I'm all for it. November 7th, Cincinnati at home. November 14th at Kansas. November 21st, Iowa State. And then to close out the regular season, I would put BYU at Utah. I would close out the season with the rivalry game. I think I've seen enough to the point where imagine if that rivalry game had been on the final week of the regular season this year. I like it in that October spot, but now that BYU and Notre Dame is going to occupy one of those October weekends, I would put enough of a gap between Notre Dame and Utah games to give BYU a little bit of breathing space between those games. Again, this Notre Dame matchup has to make the Big 12 very calculated with the way that they build out BYU's schedule. And that's kind of how I would build out BYU's schedule in a perfect situation, I think, for the Cougars, because how that sets up with 7 home games. And I mean, that Utah game will be tough because then you're talking about if you are as good as you think you're going to be and you know, in the top 2 of the Big 12, then the following week you're going to Arlington, but so be it. So be it. You know, Ohio State and Michigan, they do that. Let's just do the dang thing. Play it on rivalry weekend. So be it. The TV rating for BYU and Utah last year, only getting 2 million after all the promotion on Fox, to only get 2 million. Just play it on the final weekend at this point, because even when you're on a non-traditional week for that game, it's not delivering the TV rating that you want. So just put it on rivalry week, and then it can add to the prestige, the buildup, the aura of the game for BYU and Utah. That's how I'd build out the 2026 schedule now that Notre Dame is added to the mix. But again, we got to find out the official date of what that'll be at a later date. Let's take a break. we'll get to BYU basketball as the Cougs get ready for the Eastern Washington Eagles. We'll break it down right here on Cougar Tracks. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube page. Every day, coming to you with the latest in the world of BYU sports here on Cougar Tracks, available on the KSL Sports YouTube, audio podcast, KSLSports.com, social media feeds on KSL Sports, anywhere you pretty much consume podcasts, both video and audio. We are available, so appreciate you for being on board of the show. BYU basketball going to be taking on the Eastern Washington Eagles in a few hours, less than 4 hours to tip between BYU and EWU. That's a mouthful. Cougars remain number 10 in the AP Top 25 poll. The big storyline tonight is Abdullah Ahmed, the center signee that BYU added in November. He's going to be available to play tonight and make his BYU debut, and he's going to be available this season. He's got 3 years of eligibility remaining in his BYU career. Huge addition for BYU, just from the standpoint of it's another big man to add more versatility to the front court. Whether he's the impact player that's this X factor that BYU's hoping he can be, who knows? We'll see. But again, he comes from the G League now to college basketball. And I'll say this too. There's a lot of controversy behind that where you got some talking heads saying G League to college, that can't work. Look, maybe I'm just so open-minded to, look, teams adding mid-season additions. I love it. I remember years ago, this was a quarter century ago, but it was one of my favorite BYU teams of all time, Trent Whiting. He was a mid-year guy. This is not uncommon in college basketball. I always love when people bring up these things that, oh, this mid-year addition stuff, it's so new. This has been happening for a long time. This semester break stuff, it's not uncommon for this to happen. Is it uncommon to see a G League guy coming to college basketball? Yes, and it's not going to be the entire G League. It's very isolated cases, but for a handful of guys that can come back to college basketball, why not? And the NCAA is giving Ahmed 3 years of eligibility. Pretty fascinating to hear that too. And I think that made it more enticing to get him on board because 3 years of eligibility, one of which you can learn and be the primary backup to Keba Keita. Fascinating stuff. And it sets the foundation potentially and gets the ball moving on next year as well for BYU. And KJ Perry is also with the team too. Not expected to play though. I saw him in warmups about 90 minutes before tip-off, before the Abilene Christian game on Friday. And he's a good-looking prospect. But, Ahmed, I think, gives BYU great versatility in the front court because in a perfect world, he cements himself as the primary backup at center to Keita. And then Boop could be a backup four, a position that he admitted a week and a half ago that's where he's played his entire life and feels the most comfortable. Mihailo Boscovich can be a lot more of a stretch four. I mean, he can do a lot of different things for this BYU team. And then you still got Xavier Staten, who's a 7-footer. Like, you could do a lot of different things if you're Kevin Young with this front court suddenly with Abdullah Ahmed added to the mix. So I think it's a massive addition from just the optionality it gives the front court. Now, what does he become and how does he look on the court and the chemistry and all that? I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be our first glimpse tonight. What's the workload going to be like for him? I think in a perfect world, with how bad this Eastern Washington defense is, this is a huge blowout. And it's not one like the Abilene Christian game where BYU is struggling for a half. Hopefully this is a blowout and then some at halftime, and then the reserves can completely run the game in the second half and close out non-conference, getting a real good idea of what these guys can do on the floor, including Abdullah Ahmed. So it'll be fascinating to see what he can do tonight in this game and for the rest of this season. It's a huge pickup for BYU to get a mid-year addition and to sign him and have him on board and getting ready. He was not on the bench for the Abilene Christian game. He was just sitting in the stands. I saw him pregame courtside talking to some people, and then he went up into the stands to watch the game. He's been in the arena the last handful of games since BYU had this 4-game homestand. But BYU is rolling, and they're playing at a high level right now. It's been so much fun to see A.J. DeBonsa truly look like one of the best players in college basketball. I think him and Cameron Boozer at Duke, who was awesome against Texas Tech, number 12. He even made J.T. Toppin look small at times, how big he is in the post for Duke. He's an outstanding player. But DeBonsa, that should be the player of the year race. It shouldn't be Darren Peterson right now because Peterson's only played 4 games. He's been out for Kansas. So you can't say he's a player of the year. Now, he's got incredible ability, and he can fill it up like anyone in the sport. But AJ is settling in quite well. And BYU is playing at a high level right now. And it's impressive, too, that they've navigated non-conference, which has been a really good non-conference test for BYU. They've tested themselves. I think you'd like to have seen maybe another high-caliber game like a UConn on this schedule. You know, Arizona's had a handful of games where they've gone Florida, Auburn, Alabama, UCLA, and they've won all those games. I think BYU's schedule has been really good, and it's been a really good test and a massive step up compared to last year. But I think there was just one game, another high-level quad one that would have really cemented just the challenging nature of this non-conference schedule. Would have been one more game. But regardless, this has been a really good non-conference slate where BYU has passed with flying colors. The only game that they lost was by 2 points to UConn without 2 of their starters, Moo Davis and Keita, who suffered a concussion early in that game. That's it. Every other game they've won. And the slow start's a little bit problematic and something that they've got to fix because they didn't have any true road tests in non-conference play. The only game close to a road game was UConn. They lost. And the only other road game that they've had this year was in the exhibition play against Nebraska, who's a really good team this season. They're undefeated. They lost that one too. So true road games are still a little bit of a mystery what BYU will produce in that setting. And that's going to start here soon, January 3rd, when BYU takes on Kansas State to open up Big 12 play. So the slow start's got to get fixed. And this is the last chance to kind of take care of that and eliminate that sort of issue. But that's still a little bit of a situation to kind of be determined on how BYU starts Big 12 road games in league play. But I like what this team is doing. And that dunk, my goodness, that dunk by A.J. DeBonsa in the first half, that putback slam. Look, I don't get into hyperbole much with this BYU program and BYU history because I have a deep-rooted respect for the history of BYU sports. But that dunk by AJ, that was the greatest dunk I've ever seen at BYU. And look, I was there in person for my call against Air Force. I was in the student section watching that. I had a great view of that thing. Wonderful dunk. Incredible dunk. And I watched Yoli Childs in person too, have his throwdown against Utah in the Beehive Classic at the Delta Center. I've seen these dunks. There was also a great dunk from Trent Playstead with grainy Bigfoot-like footage at Colorado State. That was incredible. There's been some great dunks at BYU. I know that sounds crazy. Great dunks and BYU doesn't really go hand in hand. But AJ's, that was the best. Hands down. I mean, that putback slam was just next level. I mean, how do you even time that? And the guy made it look effortless. And then the stare down adds to the aura. AJ is just one of one. Enjoy this ride, Cougar fans. I mean, that guy is living up to every bit the hype that was anointed on him and then some. Enjoy this ride because you cannot assume you're just going to get that guy every single recruiting cycle. That's one of one. And he's a perfect fit too. He's embracing himself as a BYU guy. And I just think he feels really comfortable now. I mean, you hear him in these post-game press conferences. You're seeing a little bit more of his personality. It's quite the sight to see. And then he goes above and beyond with his collaboration with Nike. He gives the entire team shoes, each player, each coach, The managers as well, they all got Ja Morant's. Awesome stuff from AJ DeBonsa using his platform and bringing up the rest of the team with him. It's pretty cool to see. BYU will win big tonight. I think this could be a game where BYU scores more than 110 points against Eastern Washington. The Eagles, coached by Dan Monson, one of the great coaches out west. He was the architect to get the Gonzaga dynasty off the ground. He was the head coach in that year when they reached the Elite Eight, had that breakthrough Cinderella run before Mark Few then took over the program at Gonzaga. Monson was at Long Beach State. Now he's the head coach at Eastern Washington. He's an excellent head coach, but they're kind of down and out right now at Eastern Washington. 2-10, 346 nationally in scoring defense. There's only 361 teams in college basketball. So offense will be on full display for BYU tonight against Eastern Washington. So look out for that. I think BYU wins by close to 40. I think, honestly, that's what you should do to have the predictive metrics look kindly on this game and to get a boost. Go hammer this team by 40, close out non-conference, and then go enjoy your Christmas break as a team and then get ready for Big 12 play, which starts on January 3rd at Kansas State. We'll have a recap on KSLSports.com and more coverage of BYU basketball throughout the season as the season really starts to heat up with Big 12 play around the corner. But that's going to do it for this edition of Cougar Tracks. I appreciate all of you for being patient with a little bit later start time than usual. Thank you for your patience. The internet outage frustrated me, but we got it done here on Cougar Tracks, and it's powered by KSLSports.com.